Hej och hjärtligt välkomna ska ni vara till kvartalsrapporter med Investor Studios. Idag med Maha Capitals som i morse släppte sin helårsrapport för 2025. VD Roberto Marchiori kommer på länk från Sao Paulo, presenterar resultatet och aktuella händelser under det gångna kvartalet. Ni som tittar live kan ju som alltid, och jag ser att en hel del redan har börjat, ställa frågor till ledningen och det gör ni i chatten. Vi kommer att hantera frågorna i slutet av presentationen. Och om du inte har fått svar på just din fråga eller vill ha ett förtydligande så får du vända dig sen till IR på Maha Capital. Presentationen kommer nu att fortsätta på engelska. Roberto, nice to see you again, and I trust the weather in Sao Paulo is more pleasant than it is here in Sweden. So please, take it away.
Oh, Carlo, nice to see you again, my friend. Hopefully, I saw you are snowing very much in Sweden, so stay warm. So welcome everybody for our Q4 2025 earnings presentation. I will walk through some slides so we can update everyone related to Q transaction, also about Venezuela, and also our key financial highlights. So starting with Q update, here we bring the Q transaction timeline. So as of first quarter of 2026, remembering we concluded the relisting process with Nasdaq and also we approved the transaction through our EGM in Stockholm. And now we are just waiting some final condition precedents to be met so we can close the transaction and also make the capital raise of $27 million at 16 Swedish crowns per share. We expect to conclude this during the quarter, but hopefully in the next weeks. And of course, as we already mentioned before, we have the target to work towards the dual listing on Nasdaq USA until the end of the year, so we can enhance our capital structure and bring more liquidity. So this transaction actually transforms Maha now into a B2B credit and payments platform. So having access to the fintech platform and technology provided by Q and also operating under the American Express issuing licenses, summing with this capital base of Maha, a strong balance sheet, we will be well positioned to capture growth in these attractive high-yield B2B markets across all Latin America by leveraging American Express established global card network. And showing a little bit what we have, what's Q technology. Basically, we have a one-stop platform for local and cross-border B2B payment and financing solutions. Looking to the work Q, I think we already covered this in the previous presentations, but just remembering, it's a B2B revolving credit platform where basically suppliers can advance their receivables and clients postpone their terms of payment, and it's created for domestic transactions. When you look at the global trade card, it's a cross-border credit card program focused mainly on travel, entertainment, and also B2B cross-border payments. And of course, this is a global transaction solution. And now presenting, we are gonna say a little bit more in a couple slides going forward, but Q Rails is our B2B blockchain-based infrastructure where we can set real-time transactions for clients by using stablecoin technology, and also it's created for domestic and also cross-border payment solution through stablecoins that I already mentioned. Starting now with for Q snapshot, basically just remember Q is a proprietary digital B2B revolving credit platform. So clients can use revolving credits with a very simple setup and workflows, and at the same time, it's everything online and you can approve it by this infrastructure. So if you look to the chart, basically every single transaction is based where when a buyer sends an invoice to our systems to the buyer's approval, and basically if considering a hypothetical example here, if the buyer wants to extend 30 days their payments date, they can do that in exchange of an interest rate, And the other hand, on the other side of the table, if the supplier wants to receive upfront instead of the due date of the invoice, they can also receive upfront in exchange of a discount rate. So in this hypothetical example here, considering 30 days to collect upfront for the supplier, and additional 30 days reaching 60 days for the buyer, asking the same discount rates for both sides, we will end up with a hypothetical example here of 1.5%. We will have $1.5 income for each side of the table. So this is how we monetize through WorkQ solution. Going to GTC, or USD denominated solution designed basically to support T&E and B2B cross-border payments. Remembering is a US dollar denominated credit card program where clients can benefit from centralized accounts, which mainly will help them to make spending control for not only T&E, but also for B2B. And this can also provide additional tools for travel insurance, not only for that, but also for baggage delays. And basically here is about the same, but the only difference, this is actually a virtual card. So instead of a discount, we have the interchange fee to have access to the network, right, where the PSO machines or virtual PSOs are established. And of course, this flexibility we have, we can extend additional terms on the cutoff dates of the credit card. So if the buyer, the credit card user, wants to extend their payment date, they can ask this in exchange of additional interest rate. So the economics is almost the same, but it's a different tool for a different profile of usage. And here we are presenting now Q Rails, proprietary blockchain-based payment rails for instant payments. So this is a proprietary technology created by Q. So clients can have access to tokens and stable coins so they can make instant payments in terms of seconds or minutes. And this is also creates a more secure environment so they can transact worldwide and making transaction settlements in seconds instead of needing to waste time and wait like 2-3 days. And also, this is also important because sometimes weekends are not allowed to transact. This feature, this tool, enables transactions even during the course of the weekends. So this brings more agile transactions for our customers and clients. And going to an update here as we go through the portfolio, basically we grew the approved credit lines to $64 million as of end of January this year, where we have a combined average annual yield of 20% with potential transaction volumes around $330 million. If you break down this, we have around $46 million to WorkQ with a higher yield of 22%. And we have also the global trade card where we started through the loan agreement of around $18 million with an average annual yield of 13%. And again, after closing, we expect to have a faster pace here on building the portfolio and making this growth happening very strongly. Going to Venezuela update. So basically now we are assessing strategic alternatives so we can understand the best way to unlock value from this call option and create shareholder value to our shareholders. Remembering we have until end of May this year to exercise this call. So just highlighting the latest news on Venezuela, basically we have as of one of the main points, the Venezuela law reform, shifting from state control for the JV assets and allowing private execution and operational control, which is something very attractive for private investing. And also existing JVs will have up to 180 days to negotiate these new contracts under the new law. So basically we will have the same due date here, up to 180 days to negotiate with PDVSA or new framework agreement. On the U.S. policy topic, basically OFAC has issued the general license 49 and 50, over in the OFAC general license 49, it will allow, in broader terms, current negotiation of contingency contracts for investments on the oil and gas industry operations in Venezuela. So, of course, and then after you negotiate and have the agreement settled, you are subject to a separate authorization from AFAC through the general license number 15. So as next steps to us, basically after we already concluded, remembering the business plan, the development plan from Petro-Daneta, now the plan is to go and start negotiating the contracts under this new law reform implemented in the country, targeting operational control like many other huge partner oil and gas companies are doing nowadays. And also in parallel, looking for alternatives to unlock value from our call option. So basically, these are the main updates that I want to bring covering Venezuela call option. On the financial highlights, I would just make a quick disclaimer because as you already know, after we sold all our previous operations on the US, basically now we don't have recognition of revenues. Our financial statements is a little bit different for comparative purposes. So just want to highlight this before we enter here in this new section. So walking through the financial highlights and starting with the G&A and the financial income, as you can see in the chart, basically our G&A has a non-recurring increase over the quarter, mainly explained by these activities related to this M&A and the financial structure previously announced related to Q World transactions. And as you can see here, we are showing the total financial income, which, as you can see, we have an increase on the financial income after we basically divested from Brava shares. But of course, we expect to start deploying this cash instead of T-bills and the sort of low-digit investments into Q business and start increasing our financial, actually starting to generate revenues from and income from these credit operations. Going to the cash flow review, so basically we started the quarter with a net cash of $93.8 million, and we end up the quarter with basically 93.1 million in net cash plus credits. Basically, the main considerations during the quarter was that we receive our payment from the sale of Illinois Basin and that we prepay our past debt of $12.5 million. Nevertheless, we remain with the same net cash position, basically. And going here, we just want to bring this slide where we are going to make some comments on the pro forma that we released in the last couple of weeks. So remember, we published the pro forma consolidation of 2025, combining Q World's figures and also Maha. But basically, we thought it was important to understand what was some non-cash events and also some non-recurring events, which would bring more color on what could be the basis of net result going forward, considering the previous numbers and the previous last year outstanding credit volume of Q. So basically making all non-cash taking out all the non-cash adjustment, also excluding the discontinued operations and non-recurring G&A, and also one-off expenses, we will end up the quarter, actually the year of 2025, of an adjusted pro forma net result of 2025 of $4 million. So this is a little bit how we are considering for the future for this year, right? So we believe we are entering this new phase with a profitable base, supporting the scalable expansion through this acquisition of a new portfolio of credits. So as we go through the year and start growing the credits, we expect to have even better figures out of the year. And as closing remarks, so we expect to conclude the business combination in the next couple of weeks, where we are going to position Maha as a tech-enabled credit platform with a very scalable business model and a robust balance sheet provided by not only by Maha, but also the capital raise. Remember, we are raising $27 million. And by doing that, Maha will be well positioned to capture disciplined growth in these attractive markets of B2B clients in Latin America. We will keep our strong focus on efficient capital allocation and operational excellence in execution, and also leveraging this unique opportunity by having access to American Express network. And looking forward, of course, we'll be working hard to setting the foundations to support this story and substantial growth in Q side business. And at the same time, we will keep on our radar the dual listing, which will remain a priority to us, targeting in the second half of the year, so we can optimize the capital structure by having this access to the US listing avenue. And in the end, on Petro-Daneta, as I mentioned before, there will be ongoing evaluation on the alternatives we will have, so we can maximize shareholder value by having access to this call option in Venezuela. So this is how I want to close my presentation, Carlo. Thank you very much, and let's move to the Q&A session.
Thank you for that, Roberto. And I think you finishing off there with Petro-Urdaneta could be a good segue to the first line of questions. And I'm going to structure this as starting with Venezuela and then ending with KEO. And for you, for any listeners and viewers who would like to ask questions later on, I forward them to the company. But you mentioned the OFAC licenses, and we have a couple of questions here on the strategic options for Petro-Urdaneta, and what are your plans for the assets? And just let me read it here. Would you sell the Venezuela assets, initiate a joint venture, or will you start production if the regulatory, let's say, obstacles will evaporate?
Thank you very much, Marlon. So, like I mentioned in the previous slide, first we need to complete our negotiations considering this law reform on Venezuela, and of course to have this operational execution control. This is mainly important. And in parallel, we will see, considering what will be our new contracts, what will be the best alternative. I think you mentioned some of them, but as of now, we don't have any conclusion. We will still analyze what will be the best solution and best and the most efficient way so we can monetize and bring and unlock more shareholder value to us.
And I'll have to expose my ignorance here, because when it comes to time frame here, you mentioned expiring in May, but also 180 days here. So could you give us a feel for a time frame for Venezuela in the near term and in the longer term?
Sure. I expect that we don't need to have 180 days to make all of these changes. These contracts, basically, we already knew from the past, so we are a little bit one step ahead. So I'm very sure that we are going to have everything ready before the maturity date of our call option.
And just a final question here to round off Venezuela. Could you elaborate on any permits needed to going forward? And are you happy with what you have or what you're trying to get?
Sure. I know, like what I mentioned before, so by having the general license number 49, we have access to negotiate with PDVSA and potentially sign the contracts. Once you conclude this process, then we are going to request access to the general license number 50. So then we will be able to start operating, investing, and making the off-takes out of the country. So this is the step plan. So first we need to negotiate the contracts under the general license number 49. And once we are ready, have the the contract signed, we have the general license number 50 to start looking for the best alternative and potentially operating the field.
So more to come is the simple conclusion there. If we look at the company on a concern level here, when would you expect the combined Maha Keo to be cash flow positive on the concern level?
Sure. I remember this slide that I showed about the adjusted pro forma, excluding non-cash effects, excluding also non-recurring expenses. Basically, and having the previous year line of credit at Q was without the source of capital base, without a strong balance sheet, potentially we would be already profitable. So as long as we start growing the portfolio, hopefully we will be starting to generate better figures and be on the profitable base position.
And if we look at KPIs here, which KPIs should investor track during the first, 12 months or even in shorter term to assess whether you're, moving ahead with the integration in the way you would like?
Sure. We brought here today some KPIs. I think this is the main ones to start keeping the track. But of course, once we make the closing in the next couple of weeks and become the fintech business, we will provide more and more KPIs in a recurring basis, so shareholders have access to this new information and start tracking the evolution of the portfolio and the business. So hopefully, we will bring the more KPIs very, very soon.
Mm-hmm. And how would you prioritize capital going forward between growth or efforts in growth, lowering the debt, and possible share buyback?
No, first, nowadays we don't have any debt inside neither Maha neither Keo, so we don't have this issue. Secondly, I think the plan is to start deploying our balance sheets by growing the portfolio. I mean, increasing the credit lines over time, so we can start benefiting from these revenues, these incomes, and starting to generate positive cash flow. That's the idea. But remember that part of the plan, once we start growing, of course, the idea is to start also looking for additional sources of capital by issuing senior lenders at attractive terms and conditions, right? So we can leverage the facility and grow even more and benefit even for higher yields. That's the main rationale.
So one could expect that you will build up some sort of cash surplus here in order to attract cheaper loans in a way. For growing here, would you need further capital injections to accelerate the business? And you mentioned here, I mean, the accelerated business could be either growing the lending facilities and or credit-related acquisitions.
Sure. No, nowadays, remember, we still have the strong balance sheet of Maha, and at the same time, by closing, we will have raised $27 additional million, right? So we have a very strong liquidity to start deploying this capital over time. Of course, if there's huge opportunities, we can think to anticipate this movement, but by having this track record, deploying first the equity cushion of Maha inside this portfolio, we will create an environment and statistics, credit statistics, so senior lenders have more comfort and we can raise more cheap capital than running things and start doing right now. So that's how we think, start with the equity, and then in parallel, once we reach this portfolio size, we start looking for the debt alternatives. But of course, if there's any huge and good opportunity that makes sense, we will evaluate.
Yeah. So basically, one question here: are you looking to expand within fintech or lending, or with both areas? And the answer would be yes, if there is an opportunity.
Yeah, our focus is 100% on the fintech business, Carlo. We want to start, like I said, growing our portfolio, growing our base with our balance sheet. But of course, if there is a fintech potential M&A with solid opportunity, we will evaluate. But for now, our focus is 100% on setting here the foundations and starting growing the portfolio.
And at what interest level do you think you could attract senior debt? And if you could elaborate a little bit about the environment.
Sure. I think we already talked about this in one of our latest webcasts, but I think this will depend a lot on the market we are talking about, right? So if we are talking about Mexico, Canada, they are totally different levels, right? But again, I think once we have deployed our equity and grow and show this profitability on the portfolio, then we will be in a solid position to start raising this additional capital and starting to increase on the leverage facilities with very attractive terms and potentially around one single digits range.
And I have a viewer question here, and I believe you showed the slide about the different divisions, so to speak, on the yield here. But could you explain the concept of the yield on KEO's credit lines, and how should I put that into in combination with the revenues? But if we start first, the yield of the credit lines.
Sure. No, perfect. The yield, like I was trying to show in a more visual way, basically is a combination of the interchange or discount rate plus the interest rates that you can ask from the other side. Basically, this is for a short period of time. So if you take this amount, this percentage, and analyze this for the full year and multiply this by your outstanding credit volumes, then you get your revenue stream in an annual basis. So for having this sort of explanations, we created an appendix for this presentation. So shareholders that are trying to understand how they can estimate revenues, how they should interpret yields and credit lines, we have attached this in this presentation. So we'll have this glossary now going forward so everyone can understand what's the main KPIs, how they should looking at it.
That's thorough enough, I think. I have an email question here also. Can you give a rough estimate regarding the KEO's EBIT results for this calendar year? Please go ahead.
No, I think in terms at least of revenue. So if you make a back of the envelope maths here, so imagine that we reach our $140 million after closing balance sheet into credits, right? And multiply this by an average yield of 20% as of now, then you get a revenue income in the year, right, of around $28 million. So, I mean, this is sort of the size by only having access to our own capital. But again, the idea is to start increasing this over time, leveraging the facility so we can have even higher incomes across the year and the future.
Mm-hmm. And also, I believe you mentioned on the slide dual listings here on NASDAQ. So that would be a milestone to be looking at. Could you just mention the genius behind that?
Yeah, sure. No, I think this will be an important moment towards the capital base of Maha, right? Because by having access to this additional avenue, we will increase and bring more liquidity, institutional investors. So I think it will be an important milestone, an important moment for the company, and we expect to conclude that during the course of the year.
Mm. And also by being listing there, you will be able to attract capital. And I think that we have a question here, are banking partners required? Well, I think capital would be required. Or are you looking at any particular banking actors?
No, I think we are not in this stage to mention this. I think we will need to wait a little bit more so we can clarify on this. But for sure, we are still in a moment of focusing the closing of the transaction first. Then we are start looking for the dual listing with more focus.
Okay. All right, Roberto, thank you for that. We had questions to left, right, and center. As I said in the beginning, if there are questions here that people feel that they need a more granular or in-depth answer, we would forward them with a warm hand to the homepage. So, Roberto, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank everyone that has been listening to us.
Ja, och vi tackar alla er som har skickat in frågor både på förhand, under och sannolikt även efter sändningen. Tack ska ni ha. Hej!